I know that many of us are working from our kitchen tables or in other circumstances, so I really appreciate everyone taking the time today to join us. We have a full agenda. Just a reminder that everyone is muted except for our speakers. So if you do have any questions, please feel free to use the little Q&A and chat feature on the side of the webinar, and I can direct any questions you have to the speakers for them to answer. Today we have Lisa Schill with the Reauthorization Network, who's going to discuss the 21st Century Cures Act. In Washington, D.C., a lot of people are talking about Cures 2.0. So Lisa will be able to give some of that background information. And then Steve is going to discuss the Cures 2.0 and give an update on that. And then Melissa Getz with Living with FCS will discuss their rare disease drug approval process proposal, which they're hoping that they're giving us feedback to the Cures 2.0. And then Kylie Barber with the National PKU Alliance will be giving us an update on the Medical Nutrition Equity Act. Dylan Simon with the EveryLife Foundation will be giving an update on the Newborn Screening Saves Lives Reauthorization Act. Becky Abbott with the National Foundation for Ectodermal Dysplasias is on to discuss the Ensuring Lasting Smiles Act. And then Nancy Goodman with Kidsv Cancer will present on the Creating Hope Act today. I thought that I would just start very quickly by addressing kind of the elephant in the room. Obviously, we're all dealing with the coronavirus. So I just wanted to give a quick update, kind of the Washington, D.C. update anyway, that the President did sign emergency funding legislation earlier this month via the Coronavirus Preparedness and Response Supplemental Appropriations Act. And then just yesterday, the President signed into law H.R. 6201, which included provisions for free testing for the coronavirus and paid emergency leave. And then there's third phase that the House and Senate are working on, which would be an economic stimulus package that's being considered currently. And then, of course, good resources for anyone who needs any resources regarding the coronavirus. Please go to CDC, CMS, or NIH. At this point, I'm going to turn it over to Lisa Schill, who can give us some of that background information on the 21st Century Cures Act.
Thank you so much, Shannon. I wanted to thank you and Shannon and the RDLA for inviting me today, and virtual hugs to everyone as we navigate through the coronavirus and deal with our new normal. So please excuse any background noises as my family and kids are all working and schooling from home today. Next slide. The Reauthorization Network's mission is to advance research of the reauthorizes. We are a volunteer-based organization. The reauthorizes are a group of genetic conditions caused by mutations in genes on the RAS-MAPK pathway and affect cell growth and cell regulation. These are mostly gain-of-function mutations, and 30% of cancers lie on this pathway. These syndromes have many clinical features in common, such as distinct facial features, developmental delays, cardiac defects, growth delays, neurological issues, gastrointestinal issues, and sometimes cancer. Next slide. So the 21st Century Cures Act started with a story about two princesses, Brooke and Brielle, who have SMA, or spinal muscular atrophy. They met with Congressman Upton, the former head of Energy and Commerce, in 2014, looking for treatments. Congressman Upton was hearing from a lot of constituents without treatments and decided to create a bipartisan bill with Rep. Diana DeGette called the 21st Century Cures Act, a bill designed to help accelerate medical product development and bring new innovations and advancements to patients who needed them faster and more efficiently. They started by asking all stakeholders to submit draft guidance, including patients and families. I submitted draft guidance after RDLA informed me of Energy and Commerce's call for submissions. I was contacted by the Energy and Commerce Committee, and the 4 drafts of the legislation were shared with me and other stakeholders. New Jersey rare disease advocates, including myself, also worked together to request a roundtable of stakeholders in New Jersey during RDLA's in-district lobby days to create more guidance and attention to 21st century cures. My son Max also became a fierce advocate for cures, drawing pictures and speaking to members and their offices. Cures was eventually passed the day after my son's birthday, December 13, 2016. It was passed not because of my family or Brooke and Brielle. It was passed because the rare disease community came together as one to show our strength in numbers and share our stories and our needs, especially the fact that more than 90% of us do not have treatments. Next slide. So the implementation of cures at the National Institutes of Health. The Cures Act provided the NIH with resources to accomplish its mission to improve the health of Americans. The bill included billions of funding, but that money needs to be appropriated every year by Congress. It helped alleviate administrative burdens that can prolong the start of clinical trials. It allowed researchers to more easily attend scientific conferences. It advances data sharing, improves privacy protections, open new funding opportunities for junior investigators. It encourages inclusion of diverse populations, and it improves clinicaltrials.gov. In fact, there was just a recent survey was just completed to help modernize the site. And there's also a public meeting scheduled for April 30th. But check with the NIH for updates if that meeting is still going to be running on the 30th. Also, it funds innovative projects like the Cancer Moonshot and Brain Initiative, to name a few. But you can click on the link in the slide to read the NIH strategic plan for more details on the 21st Century Cures implementation. Next slide. So implementation of cures at the Food and Drug Administration. Millions in funding were given, but again, must be appropriated by the government every year. Cures help create more tools for the FDA to support product development in safe and effective ways. It created novel trial designs. It created dedicated patient engagement staff at the FDA. It included patient-focused drug development by providing information on how it is reviewing experience data in drug reviews. There's also a new subsection called patient experience data that is now included in drug and biological review documents. The ability to use electronic health records in the review process. And you can click on the link to check the FDA deliverables to learn more. Next slide. So when cures passed, my son looked at me and said, "We did it. Everyone's cured." He was only, 5 or 6 years old, and he thought signing that paper would mean we all had cures. And I just had to explain to him that this was just the beginning, that even though cures help bring gene therapy treatment for SMA, spinal muscular atrophy, and sickle cell patients, and encourage the head of the NIH, Dr. Collins, to start actually using the word cures and not treatments, there's so much more we need to do for the more than 90% of rare disease patients who do not have treatment. So Rep. Upton and Rep. DeGette are getting the band back together, the cure makers, this time for Cures 2.0. They asked stakeholders for draft guidance in December of 2019, and last month they started to put pen to paper. I know Steve will go into more detail, but this new legislation will focus on how technology can be used to improve care management and focuses more on access issues. And I'm so excited to see all of the rare disease community band together again to create even more help for our families and to save even more lives. It's amazing what we can accomplish when we come together. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Lisa. That was wonderful. Steve, are you there?
Here.
Perfect.
right, well, thank you very much, Lisa, for going through all of the effort that it took to get 21st acted and the great things that it has done. And as Lisa mentioned, there is an effort now by the previous sponsors of 21st Century Cures, Reps Upton and DeGette, introduce new legislation called 21st Century Cures 2.0 that would build upon a lot of the great progress of the original 21st. And I think it's important to also remember that we're still working a lot on implementation of the original 21st Century Cures Act. After you get legislation enacted, there's still a lot of work to get agencies to actually implement it or implement it properly. And so 21st Century Cures 2.0 will be a great opportunity new things, but also an opportunity to ensure that the visions of 21st Cures are being implemented. And representatives Upton and DeGette asked for community input, and the Every Life Foundation sent in recommendations for what should be included in that bill. And we vetted this through our community Congress working groups to make sure that all the stakeholders that we partner with are able to weigh in before we sent that over to their offices. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about those specific recommendations. And we look forward to working with both of the congressional drafting this legislation. Go to the next slide.
Hey, Steve. I'm getting feedback from folks asking you if you could speak louder.
I can.
That would
Is that
be helpful.
Is
Sure.
that better? Okay. I'll try to yell from my kitchen table. So the 5 recommendations that were included in our recommendations over to the bill sponsors was 1, establish a rare disease center of excellence at FDA. 2, ensure that the inclusion criteria of a clinical trial does not impede what is on the label so that patients can actually get access to an approved therapy. Codify the current practice of using a tailored approach to evaluate applications for rare disease therapies. Allow the application for a reimbursement code for a new drug to begin at the filing of an NDA to reduce the delay between approval and access, and ensure that children and young adults living with an undiagnosed condition will have access to DNA sequencing services beyond just whole genome sequencing that are currently out of reach. And as Lisa mentioned, Cures, the original bill, really focused on improving the FDA regulatory process, and Cures 2.0 is hoping to improve the access environment because all of the great improvements that have been made at FDA have not necessarily been matched by the expertise, speed, or flexibility within the access environment to actually ensure that all of these new therapies that are coming to market thanks to Cures will actually get into the hands of patients. Shannon, you can go to the next slide. So the Rare Disease Center of Excellence at FDA is a concept that was developed by the Every Life Foundation through our Community Congress regulatory working group and all of the stakeholders that make that up. The original Cures bill established the Oncology Center of Excellence, and that has been very successful as a tool for cancer drug development. We see a lot of unique challenges and opportunities in the rare disease space that we see in cancer, and so that is why we are hoping that FDA, through this legislation, would establish a Rare Disease Center of Excellence similar to the Oncology Center of Excellence. This would be a cross-cutting body that would elevate rare disease expertise within the agency and also break down communications barriers within the existing centers and divisions within FDA that can often be very siloed. It's important to note that this would not change the review division authorities existing in FDA. This would just support the current review that is ongoing. And we held a scientific workshop in 2018 that really was able to go through a number of case studies to demonstrate how effective a Rare Disease Center of Excellence at FDA could be. Next slide. The second recommendation is around labeling. And so drug labels are critically important because they inform patient, provider, and payer decision-making and ultimately determine access or lack thereof. However, we're seeing a growing body of examples in which access is being narrowed further, particularly by payers utilizing requirements from a clinical trial inclusion as a means of whether or not access will be provided. And so this is often meaning that patients are not getting access to innovative, disease-modifying, and potentially life-saving therapies even when they clearly fit within the population for who the drug is indicated. Shannon, next slide. Third, we are asking to codify the tailored approach to drug applications that the FDA currently utilizes. So many know that the Orphan Drug Act did not change the requirement for new therapies to prove a benefit to patients by substantial evidence of effectiveness. However, FDA has consistently drawn upon their own regulatory flexibility authorities in evaluating rare disease therapies. And drawing upon that tailored approach by FDA often brings therapies to approval that wouldn't have otherwise been approved. So we're recommending that we codify this practice around tailored approaches to rare disease drug and therapy review. Next slide. We're also focused on reimbursement and coding issues. And we're seeing that under current statute, a reimbursement code for a therapy may only be applied for after approval. Unfortunately, the current framework can delay a therapy from getting a code between approval and ultimately the access that a patient gets. So in an era of transformative precision medicine, a relatively short delay can actually be very life-threatening, especially in many of the pediatric population. Earlier this year, CMS announced a process to address these concerns by allowing for quarterly opportunities to apply for new codes when existing codes do not accurately reflect the new approved drug. However, we'd like to build upon this, and we recommend that be included in this legislation the ability for a sponsor to apply for a code for a new drug to treat a rare disease at the time of filing a new drug application instead of after approval. Next slide. And lastly, the focus of our recommendations also touched upon diagnostic services. And it's very important to remember that developing therapies is so important, but we also need to accurately and timely diagnose rare disease patients so that they can be a part of the process of finding those therapies. So innovations in genomics has really presented a lot of great new opportunities to diagnose and treat genetic disorders like cancer and most rare diseases, as well as predict one's predisposition to a disease. However, the cost of these services often make them out of reach for many families. So we recommend that in Cures 2.0, they include the Advancing Access to Precision Medicine Act, which is legislation that has already been introduced by Congressman Eric Swalwell of California. And this legislation would give states a higher FMAP, which is the match from the federal government to states for their Medicaid programs for DNA sequencing clinical services for children who have undergone intensive treatment for an unresolved disease that is suspected to have a genetic cause. This increased match will incentivize and encourage states to expand DNA sequencing services through their Medicaid programs and also serve as a pilot test of whether or not these services can really improve the diagnostic odyssey as well as clinical outcomes and ultimately reduce the costs to the Medicaid program. We think that it certainly can demonstrate that, and we're hoping that data from a pilot study like that would then encourage commercial payers and others to support early diagnostic coverage. Next slide. And so that concludes the 5 recommendations that we had sent over to Representatives Upton and DeGette. We have a full copy of the letter that we sent over in detail on our website. You can see the link right there at everylifefoundation.org/Cures 2.0 letter. Feel free to contact me. My email is right there. I'm happy to answer any questions, or if you're working on something related to something I talked about, happy to find ways to partner and collaborate. And if something that I spoke about really touched with you and you want to share your voice with Capitol Hill, please let Representatives Upton and DeGette, as well as your members of Congress, know that you support our recommendations as they draft that legislation. And that's all from me. I'll turn it back over to Shannon.
Thanks, Steve. Next, we have Melissa Getz with the Living with FCS.
Hi, everyone. This is Melissa. Also calling you from a kitchen table, hoping the Wi-Fi doesn't give out in the middle of while I'm talking to you. So please be patient with me if anything goes wrong. So we've been working on a rare disease drug approval process that we're hoping to tie in with Cures 2.0, but also as kind of a standalone bill that we've been working with the Hill on. So just a little bit of background on FCS. It kind of leaves the groundwork of what we're working on and how we got to where we are now. FCS Foundation was started in 2015 by myself. My daughter, Juliana, has familial chylomicronemia syndrome, and I started it with Lindsay Sutton, who is a patient. It's ultra rare. It affects about 1 to 2 per million worldwide. And patients have extremely high triglycerides, typically over 2,000. When my daughter was diagnosed, her triglycerides were 24,000. It results in recurring acute life-threatening pancreatitis. And currently, the only treatment that exists is to follow an extremely low-fat diet, about 15 grams of fat a day, which sort of helps, but most of our patients still battle hospital stays and are usually in the hospital about every other month or so with pancreatitis. So it's somewhat effective, but not very. So our experience with the FDA, next slide, thank you. Our experience with the FDA and how we got here. We had patients enrolled in a phase 3 clinical trial in 2017, 2018. It was the first ever for FCS patients. And we began our conversations with the FDA at that time. So we met with them in February of 2017 to share our patient experience with FCS, what its impact on our quality of life was, what FCS is like for patients, and what pancreatitis is like. In May of 2018, we attended an advisory committee hearing where many of our patients and physicians, myself included, testified to the need and the efficacy of this particular treatment. The drug was voted in favor of moving forward for approval. In August 2018, we were pretty heartbroken when a complete response letter was issued, despite that patient testimony. So, for a complete response letter for the FDA, I call it drug approval purgatory. The drug is not approved, it's not denied. We're just kind of waiting to see what is going to happen next. We did have another meeting with the FDA in December of 2018 with the sponsoring company to discuss what steps we could take to move forward. In February of 2019, the foundation initiated a call with the FDA to discuss patient involvement because we really felt like there was a misunderstanding about what FCS was like and the need for treatment. Next slide. So what happened next? We had that meeting in February. We offered patient input. We kind of acknowledged that the data was limited because as a rare disease, I think there were about 60 people in the study, which for a rare disease is actually pretty decent, but obviously it's not the big numbers that maybe divisions are hoping for when looking at new drugs. So we offered our foundation to, answer questions that they might have, to have patients talk to them about their experience with FCS. We continue to try to engage them and encourage involvement, but to no success. This treatment was approved in Europe about a year ago, allowing our European patients access to a treatment that U.S. patients are not receiving. So we felt like this was maybe just an issue related to FCS and our rare disease space, and we were committed to working with the FDA to figure out how we could move forward. But then we started talking to other rare disease groups, and it became clear that our experience and our frustrations with the rare disease approval journey was not isolated to just FCS or our particular drug. What we realized was that other rare disease groups shared those frustrations and those experiences during their own journeys towards drug approvals for their rare diseases. Next slide. So in response to these experiences, we started talking and we developed the following ideas that we have for requirements we'd like to see implemented in the process. And these came from our experiences as well as our conversations with other rare disease groups. So it was kind of born from our frustration, but then taking into consideration what other rare disease groups are going through and trying to prevent that from happening in the future. So the first that we have is for the FDA advisory committees to require a rare or ultra-rare expert in the science of small study populations. And this came up because at our advisory committee hearing, there was a lot of conversation about the numbers and about, patients who dropped out and looking at those numbers and how it impacted the study. And it felt often that they weren't looking at the forest through the trees, that they were kind of focused on these very specific individuals. And when you have these small studies, you have to have a different mindset when you're looking at that data. So that was one of the first things that came out of that. And that was very apparent with the questions they were asking. They were really honing in on things that were it was minutia, in terms of our rare disease. The second was, our second idea is the FDA Review Division transparency. So in doing some research, we pulled together the different divisions within the FDA, and we were curious to see what divisions saw rare disease applications, how many of them were approved, or what the numbers were for those, how rare those conditions were. And what we could find was how many were reviewed, and I believe it was just how many were reviewed. I don't think we were able to find what were approved or denied, or the specific numbers for those rare diseases, what their incidence was. So looking at those numbers, it was clear that some review divisions have a ton of experience reviewing rare disease drug applications, and other divisions have a lot less. And that needs to be taken into consideration, because when you're looking at rare disease drugs, you need to be looking at them with a different mindset than you're looking at a big disease. Our division happens to look at, diabetes and things like that, which are big studies. They don't look at a lot of rare disease drugs. And when we looked at other divisions, we saw that was throughout. So to help this disparity, we were hoping to require an annual report to Congress that sets out by division how many rare applications are reviewed, what their actions are, and the prevalence for those conditions, just to give Congress an idea of which divisions have the most experience looking at rare disease drugs, and then to offer the divisions that have less experience some additional support in looking at those. We believe our division is the right one to review our drugs, but perhaps they need some more help in the rare disease space specifically. Our third was FDA Review Division support. So to require each division to have rare disease staff in their review team. And this was one of the things that really shocked us, that we thought maybe was unique to FCS, but there was no one who attended our meetings with the FDA from rare disease unless we specifically requested them to be there. And even at that point, they were sort of just in the background of those meetings. So that was kind of curious to us. We felt like those people should have been the first to be invited and to have more of a speaking role in those meetings. So that was one of the things that we felt. And then as we talked to other rare disease groups, we realized they had similar experiences within their division. The fourth is to require an FDA consult with patients regarding potential REMS, or risk evaluation mitigation strategies. Extensive REMS are not unusual for rare disease patients, the FCS patients included. And I think there might be misconceptions within some divisions that these REMS are an undue burden on patients and that they won't follow them and they won't adhere to them. And what they don't realize is that for rare disease patients, a REMS program, it actually increases the level of care they're receiving because now someone's monitoring them even more closely. So our treatment did have a REMS program, which our patients were more than willing to follow, and they understood what that meant. And it was still, in conversations with the FDA, they felt like maybe it would be asking too much of our patients, and they sort of made that decision for us, which was frustrating. And the final is an FDA EU review. So to do a GAO study on how the European Union reviews rare disease drugs and what can be applied to the U.S. system. And this is not to undermine the current review process within the FDA. We believe and that we want to work together with them. We believe that they are working in our best interest. But if there are ways that that Europe is looking at drugs or taking into consideration additional data from open access, Is there ways that we can strengthen our process in the U.S. by looking at what they are doing? Next slide. So those are the 5 major points that we've been working on. And what have we been doing? How can you help? Since February 2019, we've been having meetings on the Hill with both Congress and the Senate. In December and January, we hosted House and Senate briefings. We had a large attendance at both of those meetings. We had 20 senators come from both sides of the aisle. It's a very bipartisan bill that we're looking at here. And they were really interested in the story we shared and in supporting it. We joined forces with patient groups from the Haystack Project who have added some payer and reimbursement issues to round it out as a Cures 2.0 package. And those are not ones that I am very familiar with. I hope that payer and reimbursement issues are something we have very soon once we have an approved treatment. But without one, that's not something that I'm very familiar with at this point. But we're not waiting for Cures 2.0 to come together. We have support from both Republicans and Democrats to introduce a bill that would get these changes made at the FDA and for all rare and ultra rare applications that come to the FDA. So while this started as an FCS issue, it has grown into something much larger than that. You know, we visited the Hill with other rare disease patient groups. At those meetings that we had in December and January, we had a variety of rare disease groups who also presented alongside the FCS Foundation. You know, we don't want to experience these same hurdles again. We experienced enough hurdles in the rare disease space towards treatment that, you know, this is one area we think that we can help reduce some of those hurdles. So we could use, you know, whatever help that people are willing to offer us to move this forward and get co-sponsors to support the bill. Next slide. So if you're interested in helping us, my email address is there, melissagetz@livingwithfcs.org. We have draft emails we can send you that you can send to your congressmen and senators. You can personalize it with your rare condition information. We can get you the staff emails that you need, you know, for you to send those to. We are happy to do kind of the background work for you to help send those letters out. And if you're able to get community support from members of your rare disease community to also send those out to their congressmen and senators, you know, we'd be so appreciative of that, just to let them know. We know that they're talking about this. You know, as we're talking with new members on the Hill, they're telling us that they've already had conversations with other people who are interested in this. So we know that word is getting around. We know people are interested. We know that they want to support us. But the more support we can get, the better. And I think that we can really make a difference here in addressing some of these issues and hurdles that we're experiencing in the drug approval process. So again, you know, please email me. Would be happy to explain more or talk more about the payer reimbursement issues, get you in touch with people who can explain that even better. But let me know if there's anything that you'd be interested in helping us with. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Melissa, for being on today and speaking. I appreciate it. I am going to turn it over now to Kylie to give an update on the Medical Nutrition Equity Act.
Okay, great. Shannon, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay, perfect. Hi, everyone. Just as Shannon said, I am Kylie Barber from the National PKU Alliance, and I'm here to give an update on the Medical Nutrition Equity Act. So just a short brief about what PKU is. PKU is short for phenylketonuria, which is a type of inborn error of metabolism that's characterized by an insufficient amount or complete lack of the enzyme phenylalanine hydroxylase, which is responsible for metabolizing an essential amino acid that exists in protein called phenylalanine. And what happens in PKU patients is a toxic level of phenylalanine builds up in the blood and actually causes irreversible brain damage. Children suffer inadequate neurotransmitter synthesis and irreversible intellectual disability. Adults also suffer significant neurological deterioration and severe mental health issues, such as depression and anxiety, just to name a few. And so the treatment for PKU is what's known as medical nutrition, or better known as medical foods. And this is the first frontline treatment for this condition and is essential to avoid the negative health outcomes. Next slide, thank you. So what are medical foods? They are basically designed for patients, as I said, with inborn errors of metabolism or certain GI conditions that impair their bodies from ingesting, digesting, absorbing, or metabolizing ordinary everyday foods. For instance, if someone with PKU were to eat a normal diet and consume normal amounts of protein, such as chicken or breads or pastas, and they weren't on these medical foods treatments, they would experience those negative health outcomes, as I mentioned before. So medical foods, they fall into three general categories. The first is a formula, which for PKU contains all the essential nutrients and components of protein without the offending phenylalanine, so that the body can grow and develop normally. And then the second part are what's known as modular products, which are different amino acid mixtures that the body requires. And the third are what's known as low protein modified foods, which are mainly breads and pastas, different baked goods, and cheese and meat substitutes that provide caloric substance for the body, but don't have, once again, that offending amino acid phenylalanine. Next slide. Let's skip this one. I think that I saved the slides out of order. Welcome to working at home. So we'll come back to this one. Thanks, Shannon. Okay, so the cost of medical foods to treat IEMs is very, very expensive, specifically considering the fact that insurance companies are not privy to covering it. So the estimated annual cost for treating a person with an IEM with medical nutrition or foods ranges from about $2,000 for an infant to almost $25,000 for a man or a pregnant woman per year. Once again, the products can vary in cost depending on the amount needed to feed an individual and type of condition being treated. Formula for PKU can range from $300 to over $500 per 6-container case. Low protein modified foods cost up to 8 times the cost of normal food. And once again, you can't buy these products at a normal grocery store. They have to be first authorized by a physician and then ordered out through a manufacturer. Next slide. And as I briefly touched on, insurance companies are not, at this point, obligated to cover the medical nutrition, specifically because FDA does not regulate them as a drug or pharmaceutical. Rather, they're regulated as a food or supplement. Currently, there are about 35 states that do have some sort of mandate for the coverage of these medical foods, but the problem is there's different stipulations within each state. For instance, one state may cover the cost of the medical foods so long as it's administered enterally or through a G-tube, despite the child being capable of consuming it orally. Or another state may cover it up into a year, or maybe when the patient turns 18, they'll drop coverage, different things like that. So the Medical Nutrition Equity Act aims to ameliorate this issue. Next slide. So basically what the Medical Nutrition Equity Act would do was mandate both private and public insurance to cover the cost of these medical foods, including the formulas, the modular products, as well as the low protein modified foods for inborn errors of metabolism, as well as certain GI conditions. Now currently, the current status of this bill is it's been introduced in the House of Representatives just this past May by Representatives Jim McGovern and Jamie Herrera Butler. We currently have 60 co-sponsors on the bill, and it's bipartisan. We're really excited about this number, 60 co-sponsors. It's the most that this legislation has ever seen. And we also have exciting news related to the Senate bill. We finally have found a Republican willing to champion the bill alongside Senator Casey, which is Joni Ernst from Iowa. And the introduction of this legislation in the Senate is still to be determined. We are working on finding a few more Republicans to agree to be original co-sponsors of the bill. And then Shannon, if you will go back to the slide that says advocate with us. Perfect, yep, thank you. Okay, so our game plan right now is we are asking all organizations to email a letter to the health aides of Senators Cassidy from Louisiana, Young from Indiana, as well as Blackburn from Tennessee, to ask these members to sign on as co-sponsor once the legislation has been introduced, and then we will go back and follow up and ask them to be actual original co-sponsors. And once organizations have forwarded that email or sent that email, the idea is to forward that email on to Megan Gordon-Dawn, who is the Coalition for the Patients and Providers for Medical Nutrition. And her email is right there just so she can keep track to see what organizations have sent the letters. And if you have any questions, I am happy to answer them. My email is kbarber@curetheprocess.org. And I will turn the time back over to Shannon.
Thank you, Kylie. Great job.
Thanks.
Dylan Simon with the Every Life Foundation on the Newborn Screening Saves Lives Reauthorization Act.
Great. Thank you, Shannon. Thank you, Shannon. So I'm here to talk about the Newborn Screening Reauthorization Act. Just a little bit of background on newborn screening. Newborn screening is a very important, vital public health program that tests all 3.8 million babies born every year for a variety of metabolic and genetic conditions that would hinder their normal development. Approximately 1 in 300 newborns has a condition that can be detected through screening, and early detection and early treatment can help prevent intellectual and physical disabilities for these children. And newborn screening is so important because time is so important, and the ability for an early diagnosis, which allows for early treatment, can really make a large impact in these kids' lives. In addition, early detection not only saves lives, but we know that it saves overall cost to the healthcare system by avoiding the unnecessary costs associated with the diagnostic odyssey. My apologies. Next slide, please. Just a little bit of background on the federal RUSP, or the Recommended Uniform Screening Panel. It's a list of disorders recommended by the Secretary of HHS for which diseases should be on the newborn screening panel. It's important to note that it is a recommendation. Every state runs their newborn screening panel, and they make the final decision on which diseases are on their panel. But the federal RUSP is a big influence in all this, and every state takes their guide from the federal RUSP. To get on the federal RUSP is an evidence-driven, science-backed process that requires the ability to screen for the disorder as well as an effective treatment. Currently, there are 35 core conditions on the RUSP. Next slide, please. And just a little bit of background on the Newborn Screening Saves Lives Reauthorization Act. When this was originally passed in 2008, it helped to formalize a federal newborn screening program. Prior to that, there had not been. And that was seen in newborn screening across the country. So as you can see in 2007, only 10 states as well as DC required infants to be screened for all the recommended diseases. As of today, all 50 states screen for at least 31 out of 35 conditions. And we are about to hit about, I believe, 6 states will screen for all 35, and the number is growing every year. Next slide, please. And so here's a little bit of information about the current bill. So the current bill was introduced by Representative Roybal Allard as well as Representative Mike Simpson in the House, and it reauthorized the HRSA grants that help to provide education programs to both the parents and healthcare providers in the state level, as well as to improve follow-up care for infants who are detected with conditions. In addition, it would reauthorize the advisory committee discussed earlier that provides states with the RUSP to ensure that every infant is screened for these conditions. In addition, it would direct the National Academy of Medicine to conduct a study on how to modernize the newborn screening program. It is still, the newborn screening program on the federal level is still relatively new, as you can see, and so we're always looking for ways that we can improve the system as a whole. In addition, it would increase authorization levels for these programs, which is vital. More money equals more grants, and more grants is going to improve the education that the states can provide. Next slide, please. So the bill did go through, hold on one moment. The bill did go through the House markup process, which we're really excited about. Dr. Bikini was able to testify, and Dr. Bikini is the former head of the advisory committee. Next slide, please. Oh, my apologies, but we'll stick with this slide, and I can go from there. Following that markup, while the Senate did introduce a companion bill, that Senate bill is currently not moving. However, right after the Senate introduced their bill, the House did unanimously pass the Reauthorization Act. However, since the Senate bill has not moved, the authorization of these programs has expired as of September 30th of last year, which means that all these programs remain unauthorized at the moment. Next slide, please. And so just some legislative updates on the issue. There have been some workarounds to ensure that the federal newborn screening program is still functioning. First and foremost, the advisory committee is now open. We are very excited about that. That is recent within the last couple of weeks. Secretary Azar uses authority to designate the committee as a discretionary committee, and will resume business as of tomorrow. We are very excited about this. It allows for these advisory committee to begin reviewing the packages to be added to the RUS, and we know there is at least one condition that has been waiting and can now submit their package officially so that can begin the review process. In addition, funding for multiple newborn screening programs were in the federal FY 2020 budget. Both the CDC's newborn screening and quality assurance program, which ensures that these tests are working to the best of their ability. As we all know, machines at times don't function the way they need to, and this CDC program ensures that these machines and these tests are working to the best of their ability. In addition, it did include funding for the HRSA program, which, as discussed earlier, helps to provide education for both healthcare providers and the parents themselves. There are multiple health programs that need to get reauthorized at the end of May, and so we're hoping that we might be able to join that program as well and move as a package. And an important part to discuss at the end, while a lot of the parts of the Reauthorization Act have been either funded or now open with the advisory committee, it's important to know we still have work to do to pass legislation. There are key parts in this Reauthorization Act that improve the current system. A key part of that is that National Academy of Medicine study. But in addition, there are various ways within the HRSA and CDC that it works to modernize the federal newborn screening program. And so while we're very excited that the federal newborn screening program is functioning in a lot of ways, these reauthorization acts are not just about functioning, they're about improving. And so without the reauthorization, we cannot see the improvements that we need to see at the federal level. Next slide, please. So now to the Senate, just a little bit of background on why we are stuck in the Senate. So the Senate Health Committee has not yet held a markup bill. This is because Senator Paul is pushing for a change to the bill that will require parents to them to provide informed consent to allow for the newborn's unidentified dry blood spots to be used for research purposes. The dry blood spots are a huge part of the research process, and requiring this informed consent would create a huge burden of the program. So these dry blood spots, very importantly, a key part to, they are de-identified biospecimens, and the laboratory staff and approved researchers use these dried blood spots to improve the screening conditions and to develop new screening conditions. As discussed earlier, the CDC's quality assurance program, to maintain these screening procedures, we need dry blood spots to ensure that this method is working to the best of its ability. Without these dry blood spots, newborn screening would not be able to continue because we could not ensure that these screening methods are functioning properly. Next slide, please. So just a little more information on the informed consent amendment and the implications that it has. So first and foremost, it's going to affect the current newborn screening test. It's estimated that you need anywhere between 3 to 10,000 unique samples to properly test the range of the diseases. The storage of these dry blood spots is essential to ensure that we can maintain these systems. In addition, the newborn screening research is going to be affected. More than 70% of research published using these dry blood spots develop new tools and treatments for diseases not yet on the RUSP. So not only is it going to harm the current diseases, but we're going to completely stop in its tracks the ability to add new conditions to the RUSP, because without these samples, the academic community cannot do the research that they need to ensure the fact that we can develop the new screening materials and develop the new treatments to then get added to the RUSP to ensure early diagnosis and early treatment. In addition, we know that the effective informed consent on the state level is not good. It creates a high level of burden on the hospitals. In California, they did a pilot study, and only 52% of newborns were invited to participate in the study. However, 90% of parents who were asked did consent to participate, which suggests that a vast majority of parents were not even asked that. Hospitals did not participate in the process, and as well as a vast percentage did not ask over half of the parents who were in the hospital. So we know that informed consent does create a huge burden on the hospitals, and that would lead to parents not even having the opportunity to provide consent. In addition, we've been here before. The federal government has looked at this issue, and they highlighted how it involved minimal risk and was impractical to try to continue this research without the informed consent. And so for next steps, next slide, please. We are calling to please contact Senator Paul, as well as Chairman Alexander, as well as your senators. Let them know of the importance of passing this legislation without the amendment. Share with advocates in Kentucky and Tennessee. We are definitely focusing on these two senators. And if you have any questions, please feel free to let me know.
Great. Thank you so much, Dylan. Becky, are you on the line?
I'm on the line.
Great.
Thank you, Shannon. Thank you, RDLA, Every Life, for hosting this. I hope everybody is staying healthy and safe, and thank you, everybody, for all your support and just taking everything day by day and joining in on the call. So today I'm here to talk about the Ensuring Lasting Smiles Act. Just to give you a little bit of background, according to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, 1 in 33 babies in the United States is born with a congenital anomaly, and approximately 120,000 of those children born annually with birth defects, and then also 40,000 of them will require some type of reconstructive surgery to repair their birth defect or congenital anomaly. Some of the examples of congenital anomalies include cleft lip, cleft palate, skin lesions, vascular anomalies, malformations of ear, hand, and feet, and then also craniofacial deformities or anomalies, which also include our organization, ectodermal dysplasias. Our children are usually missing many of their teeth. Some kids only have 2 or 4 teeth, and then many of them have no teeth at all, which they will have no teeth for the rest of their life unless they get these medically necessary treatments. So although medical professionals and surgeons are able to correct these problems, some insurance companies deny access to care and treatment by labeling the procedures as cosmetic or non-functional in nature. Next slide. So the Ensuring Lasting Smiles Act would ensure that all private, group, and individual health plans cover medically necessary treatments, and it specifies dental and oral procedures to repair all congenital anomalies. It would stipulate that such coverage include services and procedures that functionally repair and restore any missing or abnormal body part, as long as it is medically necessary to achieve normal body functioning or appearance. And then, as I said before, it does clarify any type of adjunctive dental, orthodontic, or prosthodontic treatment, also like bone grafts and different complex care that our family members need. It also excludes cosmetic procedures, and it excludes cosmetic surgery.
So we're incredibly thankful for our amazing co-sponsors. In the Senate, the bill number is S560, and our bill leads are Senator Tammy Baldwin from Wisconsin and Senator Joni Ernst from Iowa. We currently have 40 Senate co-sponsors, 20 Republican, 19 Democrat, and 1 independent. And then in the U.S. House of Representatives, we have, for our bill leads, Representative Colin Peterson from Minnesota and Representative Jennifer Riggleman from Virginia. The House bill is H.R. 1379. We currently have 301 House co-sponsors, and the breakdown for that is 207 Democrat and 94 Republican. As I said, we do have strong bipartisan support, which we're very thankful for. The Ensuring Lasting Smiles Act was reintroduced on 2/26/19 during Rare Disease Week. So we have made significant progress over the course of just a little bit over a year. This bill is broad in scope. It does not just include ectodermal dysplasias. It includes all congenital anomalies, so it is not disease specific. Over the past couple of months, the Ensuring Lasting Smiles Act, or ELSA, has made hit some significant milestones. So on January 8th, we did have our first hearing in the Energy and Commerce Subcommittee. On January 28th, we had our first hearing with the Education and Labor Subcommittee. On February 26th, which was exactly a year from the date of reintroduction, the bill was placed on the House consensus calendar since we hit the 290 supermajority number in the House. And then on 3/11, we had our first Energy and Commerce markup, which the bill passed through subcommittee and now is gone on to the full Energy and Commerce full committee. So we have a couple of calls to action. As of this week, we currently have 50 organizations supporting ELSA, including the National Foundation for Ectodermal Dysplasias. We're asking any and all patient advocacy organizations to sign on to support ELSA. There's a link there. You can also go to nfed.org and just type in ELSA supporters to add your name to the growing list of organizations that are supporting ELSA. If you are going, you probably won't be meeting with your legislators anytime soon, but if you're going to be calling or emailing them, we just please ask that you, number one, ask them to co-sponsor ELSA if they haven't. If they have co-sponsor ELSA, please ask them to continue to move this legislation forward through the 116th Congress because we want to keep this bill at the forefront of all of these offices as we've garnered immense support over the past year, and we don't want this to go to the wayside with all of the other issues that are happening on the Hill right now. We also have a group called the Ensuring Lasting Smiles Act Facebook Advocates Facebook group where you can learn more about this legislation and how you can help with our advocacy initiatives. You can also register as an advocate to receive updates on the progress of the bill. We're also asking patient advocacy organizations, of course, to send letters to their legislators and ask them to co-sponsor as the more support and co-sponsors we get, the faster we can move this through Congress. So as I said, we need your help. We need the support of all organizations. I included the list from congress.gov that you can click on. Otherwise, you can just go to congress.gov and type in S560 for the Senate bill or HR 1379 for the House bill to look to see if your legislator has co-sponsored. You can also reach out to me at any time at becky@nfed.org. I'd be happy to provide any of the staff information for any of the offices that you need to reach out to if you want to advocate for the Ensuring Lasting Smiles Act. And I just really want to take just a second to thank everybody who has been reaching out and emailing their legislators. We've really garnered a lot of support over the past year, and we're really thankful for your support. Our families are really counting on this bill to keep moving forward so that they can get these medically necessary treatments. So thank you, everybody, and have a good rest of the week.
Thank you, Becky, and congratulations to you and your organization. It's very exciting to see. I'm going to turn it over now to Nancy Goodman with Kidsv Cancer.
Hi, everyone. This is Nancy speaking. And thank you so much, Shannon, especially for finding a photo of me that's 10 years old. I really do love that. So today I'd like to present to you on the Creating Hope Reauthorization Act. Next slide. The Creating Hope Act authorizes the Pediatric Priority Review Voucher Program. Next slide. So some of you may be familiar with this. This program was passed in 2012, and what it does is it provides a financial incentive for pharmaceutical and biotech companies to develop novel therapies for rare diseases that begin in childhood. Next. It's been an incredibly successful program since 2012 when the program was passed. We've had 23 new rare pediatric disease drugs, and currently the vouchers are trading at $111 million. So demonstrating a major valuation that motivates companies to develop drugs for our kids. Next, please. Also, the program is not disease specific. It applies to any rare disease that begins in childhood and that is life-threatening. The technical term that receives priority review of its own merit. So where are we? The Creating Hope Act, which establishes this priority review voucher program, is law. And the issue is that it sunsets in September. So we are asking Congress for a permanent reauthorization, and it has been introduced in the House as H.R. 4339 with Congressman Butterfield and McCall. And we are looking forward to introduction in the Senate from Senators Casey and Collins. Next slide, please. So the issue here, I just want to step back and give you all a little political background here. So our hope was that we could get it attached to a May healthcare bill that's going through Congress. And because of the coronavirus crisis, it's really unclear what omnibus bills will be going through and when they're going through. The current coronavirus bills are going through clean with no attachments, and I absolutely understand that. The issue is that we just really need something to attach this to by September. And so I'm asking for all of your support. The problem we have right now is that Senator Casey has been our lead senator for 10 years. We've had to get reauthorization 3 times. This will be our 4th time. And his staffer, Sharon Miskornick, will not introduce the bill. It's drafted. We're asking for the same language as the House. The language is 1 sentence. The sentence says that we're crossing out the sunset provisions so that it's permanent. That's it. It would take her no time at all to do. I don't actually honestly understand why she's not introducing it, but she insists that Casey be the lead, and she has not agreed to introduce it yet. And the reason I'm here talking to you is I really need accountability on her part. I really need folks to tell her that we're watching her, and that if she, through her current strategy, if she's not successful in getting this reauthorized, this 10-year program dies, and that would really be another loss through the coronavirus crisis that we're facing. So I'm asking you all to call her and ask her to introduce the bill. And I do want to say that this sounds like a very professional set of presentations, which is terrific. If you contact her, if you email her, it's critical that you be professional and polite. And if you can't be polite, please do not email her. In past times when I've asked people to send emails, sometimes people are understandably upset, and that really is very destructive to our efforts. But if you can, her email is right there, Sarah_Miskornick@help.senate.gov in Senator Bob Casey's office. Please tell her about your organization, tell her about your experience of your rare disease. Ask her to introduce the Creating Hope Reauthorization Act with the same language as H.R. 4339. This makes the Creating Hope Act permanent. and ask her to introduce it as soon as possible. After you contact her, please email me so that I know who she's heard from, and my email is down here below. Thank you all so much, and I wish you a safe and healthy, secluded period. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Nancy, and thank you to all of our speakers for joining us today from wherever they are most likely teleworking. I did want to just give you all a save the date. Our next monthly webinar will take place April 23rd, and we'll do it at noon, our regular scheduled time, noon Eastern, and most likely that will be a webinar only and no in-person meeting for the April meeting. But if you would like to speak on a issue that you or your organization is working on, or if there's a particular topic that you would like to be presented on the next webinar, please feel free to reach out to me, Shannon, at svonfelden@everylifefoundation.org. And I just want to thank our sponsors for our RDLA webinar this month. And thank you to everyone. I hope we all stay healthy and safe emotionally and mentally and physically during this time. So thank you, everyone, for joining us. It was wonderful to have everyone join us today, and look forward to our next webinar next month. Thank you, everyone.